Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world of ours. I hope you are safe and sound. I'm Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and welcome to Carnegie Connects, a series of conversations on issues of critical importance to America and to the world. Today, I'm honored and pleased to have on the program, again, welcome back to the program, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. I'll formally welcome you in a minute, Mr. Prime Minister. I'd like to set the stage with a brief comment. We're now entering the 6th month of the Israel-Hamas war, and there are so many questions that remain rather than answers. My friend and colleague, William Burns at State Department and formerly of Carnegie, now CIA Director, commented that in his career, he's encountered no more tangled and explosive an issue than the Israeli-Hamas war. And it's easy to see why. There's no sense of how this is going to end. No answer to the rising tensions on Israel's northern border with Hezbollah. No solid information on the fate of the hostages. No indication that there's any plan, let alone a developed and concrete blueprint for Palestinian governments post-conflict. No sense how to deal with the physical, emotional, and psychological destruction wrought for much of the population of Gaza, and no sense really of any sort of political horizon that would offer a pathway, not just out of the war, but to a better alternative for Israelis and Palestinians. Fortunately, many questions. And fortunately, today we have someone who can hopefully guide us through the complexities of the situation and perhaps help us understand better Israel's role in the conflict, specifically the question posed by the title of our discussion today. Can Israel achieve its goals or a victory in this war with Hamas? Prime Minister Ehud Barak needs no introduction. I'll just mention, he deserves one. Let me just mention a few points. Ehud Barak was the 10th Prime Minister of the State of Israel. His more than two-year prime ministership coincided with some of the most momentous efforts at Israeli-Palestinian, Israeli-Syrian peacemaking, and Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000. Before being elected Prime Minister, Ehud Barak completed an illustrious 36-year career, ending as Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces. He received his Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and Physics from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and his master's degree in Economic Engineering Systems at Stanford in California. He's a brilliant conversationalist and an astute and acute analyst of Middle Eastern politics. So, Mr. Prime Minister, can I welcome you back to Carnegie Connects?
Thank you for having me. I'm ready.
Always a pleasure. So let me start with the military campaign. You said at the Halifax Security Forum that even if Israel was losing the information war, that the military effort to destroy Hamas as a military organization would continue. And I'll quote you here. You said, "We have to complete it. It's a compelling imperative. Israel's government cannot survive if it cannot live up to its basic commitment to its citizens and if Hamas can come back to power." So let me ask you about the issue of the day, which appears to be an Israeli determination to continue to operate and move in a substantial way into Rafah at some point. What's your view of the military objectives that the Israelis have accomplished with respect to Hamas, and what's more to follow?
I think that basically, you probably have to correct what you quoted from Halifax. I don't care if this government will fall. In fact, I would love to see it falling, but Israel cannot afford. It's not the government. Israel cannot afford any result but the end of ruling of Hamas over Gaza and the end of any possible threat to Israel from Gaza. And in this regard, a plan was chosen in order to try to reduce the amount of casualties among the Gazans to start not with the whole Gaza Strip simultaneously, which militarily speaking makes more sense to take simultaneously both Rafah and the refugee system and Gaza and Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis together. But in order to enable this movement of population, the actual invasion into Gaza, delayed by several weeks, where a corridor was open and allowed this concentration of population in Rafah, which enabled to complete Gaza with less damage. However painful, the actual results are less damage that could have been otherwise. But create this now another problem, how to make Rafah a place where you can fight against Hamas without hitting too many of the over 1 million Gazans there. So a lot had been achieved, especially in destroying the ruling system of Hamas, but it has not been completed, and that's a matter of fact. The Hamas still control Rafah, and still have certain kind of presence even in Gaza itself, in the city. When Israelis went a little bit far from the Shifa hospital, within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it became once again a center where Hamas activists are moving, and in the neighborhoods of Gaza, they participate in trying to control the distribution of food and other supplies. And it's not over. And of course, they have still in the Gaza Strip, both in Gaza and for sure in Rafah, several thousands of fighters still active and there. So it's not completed. And it won't, I don't believe that an operation in Rafah will start during the next 2 or 3 weeks. It might take time. But once it started, if other solution won't be found, it will take probably 2 or 3 months. And even then, Hamas will not control any area of Gaza, but it will still have certain capacity of running after individual Israeli small units and try to cause casualties and killing. So it's not, a lot of lessons had been learned about how to fight under the ground and how to do, and we were surprised by the depth of the infrastructure there, but our soldiers are fighting courageously, and basically they are moving forward, completing the missions.
So you're persuaded that regardless of American objections and concerns, that Israel will mount at some point. It'll take time to prepare, particularly if there's any serious thought given to what to do about the civilian population. You think that the Israeli government will move ahead with a major campaign to destroy Hamas's remaining organized military structure in Rafah?
I cannot know. Based on what they say, especially what the Prime Minister is saying, we will do it anyhow. I thought all along the way, from the second week, that the right strategy for Israel should be totally different. It should have been coming behind closed doors with the Americans and planning, first of all, the morning after. I always stick to an old Roman saying, if you don't know which port you want to reach, no wind will take you there. Or from Alice in Wonderland, you can find the same with the rabbit. If you, Alice, do not know where you want to go, it's either no road will take you there, or any road will take you somewhere. I think it was a grave mistake, because immediately at the very beginning, there was readiness among the Arab neighboring countries, mainly the Egyptians, who have a lot of leverage of the Gaza, of the Gazans because of the geography, and probably Jordanians for sure, the Emirates and other members, to establish the natural solution, which is a multinational Arab force that, backed by the majority resolution of the Arab League and by America, is ready to take it over, demand from Israel to stop the fighting and withdrawal, and ready to take it over, because the main issue from our point of view is, okay, if we destroy the reigning capability of Hamas, and even if we didn't complete fully the last warrior or the last rocket launcher, we have to hand it over to someone. And this someone cannot be Norwegian and some sub-Saharan African. It should be Palestinian by the very nature. And I thought we have to coordinate it with the Americans, coordinate with the neighbors. And by now, probably even 2 or 3 months ago, we could have handed over to this force, which, unlike Israel, doesn't have to run after the last warrior of Hamas, because Hamas would not have dared to shoot at an Arab force sent by, for short time, for temporary period, by the Arab League in America in order to prepare the ground for coming back of a revitalized Palestinian Authority. This is the only solution. This is the normal solution. It's infinitely better than the alternative of following the visions of the Messianic racist Michiganers in Bibi's government. Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, who are hearing voices from heaven telling them what to do. That's not an alternative for a mature, developed democracy in this complicated region. But having said that, that's already a milk that was how you call it, it's already behind us. We cannot do it now. So by now, something very creative should be raised in order to avoid the need of Israel to enter Rafah after certain preparation, and make sure that the several battalions as it's called, of Hamas cannot operate or threaten Israel from there. For us, for me, it's a simple situation. Israel has this compelling imperative to make sure that Hamas will not rule over Gaza, will not threaten Israel from there. Number 2, Israel does not have any interest to stay there for the longer period. And number 3, the Gazans are going nowhere. All these illusions that they can be pushed out, some transfers, all nonsense. So the real question from day one is, to whom can we hand over the Gaza Strip once we complete the mission? And now it's more complicated because even our neighbors are more hesitating how to participate, how to help, and some of them are not totally unhappy to see Israel going deeper into the mud together.
I don't want to relitigate the past, but I have to ask you, because you are a strategic thinker. Was there an alternative in your mind post October 7th, in the wake of the indiscriminate, willful, sadistic killing of Israeli civilians, the raping, the sexual degradation, the taking of hostages who are now being abused still in Gaza? Was there a realistic alternative on planet Earth by this Israeli government, with the expanded war cabinet to include Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, to the military tactics that the IDF followed over the last 5 months? Was there a fundamentally different plan to deal with Hamas in Gaza?
Yeah, there is. I think that I already mentioned it, or probably did not explain it clearly enough. It's not about the military. Military operation probably might happen according to those outlines almost anyhow, in any case. There could be some variations of tactical approach, but I don't want to dive into it right now. And of course, in retrospect, it would have been better if less than 30,000 Palestinians were killed, and many of them are Hamas warriors, but for sure, majority are civilians. So probably something could be devised a little bit better. But the real difference is in the political side of it. Netanyahu, for reasons unexplainable to rational thinking, but explainable only by his interest to stay in power at whatever price, delayed, was unready. Of course, people in the cabinet raised the questions I'm raising now. Why not to start, think first what we want afterwards? He refused and rejected any such discussion. And what had been to be put on the table is exactly what President Biden raised in a Washington Post article probably a month or 6 weeks after the whole thing started. Namely to come behind closed door, to coordinate behind the regional axis led by America of the moderate autocrats and Israel, Egypt and Jordan, the members of the Abraham Accords, and even the Saudis, which seems to be ready to join the club, and together to coordinate a plan how to bring back the revitalized Palestinian Authority. Of course, Israeli public will not love it. The whole public is now under the impact of this trauma of the October 7 was the worst event in a way since the Holocaust, but for sure since the establishment of state of Israel, the worst day we ever experienced. It's something to think of some foreign force that would I know, make a raid on San Diego from Tijuana, killing 40,000 Americans in one day, not 3,500 or 4,000, but 40,000. And that's the equivalent in terms of number. It's a shock for every Israeli. And there is a strong feeling of pain, of frustration, of humiliation, calling for revenge, so that all the Arabs are the same. There are no uninvolved people in Gaza and so on, which my generation can tell you it's normal human response. You can understand it on the individual level, even on collective level, but it's a bad guidance for statesmanship or for leadership. It's the role of leaders to think, to talk, to express compassion. Biden did it better than Netanyahu in a way, but to express compassion to all the suffering, but to lead. Lead means to think in a cold-headed what is needed, not just what the weather vane tells you about the public mood at the moment. And I think that the operations of the IDF should have been impressive enough for the public. And it's all about being able to tell the truth that we do not have an interest to stay there forever because of our experience. I still remember that we saw the same about the Jordanians and Egyptians. My generation saw a lot of wars, bitter wars with them, and as a young man, I was sure that we will never have a peace with Egypt and Jordan. We now have it for 45 and 30 years respectively, and just close our eyes and think how much more complicated our situation might have been if we did not have this peace with Jordan and with Egypt. So I think that leadership, it's a leadership role to tell the public the truth, to show empathy, to hug them, but at the same time to tell them the truth and lead according to the strategic interests of the country, not diving into mistakes. Now, this tendency to dive into mistake is not typical for Israel. It happened to us several times in the past. It even happened to America following 9/11, which was relatively great impact, but relatively to what happened to Israel in October 7. It's probably less impressive, and it still dragged America into a war that in a way did not end until now.
You know, I interviewed General Petraeus several months ago. He just came out with a book called Conflict, and he argues along the same lines that you have, that in a war, several things matter. First of all, identifying the big ideas, the ultimate objectives strategically, and then having leaders who are willing and able to communicate to their publics realistically what those goals are and the means to achieve them. Well, there are no rewind buttons now, 6 months into this war. So in terms of the day after. I describe it as the day in between. The day in between the major military conflict ends, major military conflict, and some post stability, security, prosperity for Gaza. What are the elements that are required, in your judgment, to have any hope of creating a better pathway, first in Gaza and then beyond politically with Palestinians?
I summarize the until the following way. We already said the October 7 was the worst plan in the history of Israel. We are now after almost 6 months. There are significant achievements, but a victory, not to mention the absolute victory, is still quite far away, probably many months, probably a year, probably more. And we are facing a T-junction where the road leads to opposite directions. And we have to make a decision where we want to go. Netanyahu totally lost trust of the people. And the need is urgent to decide, are we going with the Americans, namely say to Biden in a clear voice, yes, but we have a lot of reservation, we have a lot of interests, security related mainly, which are not apparent from reading the text of the American proposals. So we will have a lot of discussion, but we have decided to go with you and with this axis of moderate autocrats facing the other axis of rogues entities led by Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, whatever, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and so on, backed probably by Russia. And we are going to join this and create this new order in the Middle East where Hamas does not rule and cannot threat Israel, but a revitalized, better behaving Palestinian Authority, Israeli or the Gaza, backing, probably even supported temporarily for 6 or 12 months by an Arab multinational force, and the reconstruction and infrastructure of Gaza is backed by the financial capabilities of the Emirates and probably Saudi Arabia, normalization with Saudi Arabia, and Israel has to contribute into this whole new order in order to have it taking off. Israel should be ready, first of all, to bring in a revitalized Palestinian Authority, and at a certain stage later, probably not in the first 6 months, but start a political process, diplomatic process toward a two-state vision. That's the only possible trajectory. Everything in illusion, everything that has been tried. I was warning on the Israeli public and TV for months. Don't delude yourself that you can hand it over to certain mafiosi families, Hamulas in the Gaza Strip. It's ridiculous. As long as they perceive to be sent or authorized to act by Israel, they will become traitor and collaborator, and Hamas will easily kill them and deter them. Don't think that you can expel all the leadership of Hamas and all the warriors like we did in Beirut. It's 40 years ago. It's totally different story. In Beirut, Arafat and his people were guests, even not very kind of benign guests. So the moment we surrounded them in Beirut, we pushed them basically to become guests in another country, in this case, Tunisia. It's not the same. These are Gazans, and they will be controlled by Palestinians. And the Palestinians are already either in Gaza or in Ramallah. And the only entity which is recognized by the rest of the world and could be legitimate in Gaza is the Palestinian Authority. So General David Petraeus, from his experience in Iraq, he is really a wise and thoughtful advisor on this issue and even practitioner.
To get to that point, however, where you can see serious Palestinian governance in Gaza by a revitalized Palestinian Authority, you have to figure out a way to revitalize that authority. And in a situation in which Gaza right now is suffering an acute humanitarian catastrophe, experts believe that a good portion of the population is on the verge of either famine or catastrophic starvation. How do you even begin to create legitimacy for Palestinian governance? Hamas is a military organization, may be finished, but it may remain as an insurgency. The Palestinian Authority is being undermined by the current Israeli government, even as you and I speak. Elections are out of the question now, either in the West Bank or in Gaza. I guess all of this leads me to believe, Mr. Prime Minister, to the conclusion that in order to do any of what we're talking about, you really do need new leadership in Israel and on the Palestinian side. And I guess we should talk about the subject you know best first. You've called for new elections as early as June. Those are unlikely now. How do you get to the point where the people of Israel get to choose, get another choice, an alternative?
Let's start with the Palestinian side. Of course, Palestinian Authority, as of now, they are weak. They are corrupt. They are short of perfect on almost any aspect, and they are not very popular in the Gaza Strip. So I think that they should be backed to a certain extent, probably for several months or a year, by a more assertive Arab intervention. Egypt should be at the center of it, and I think that the Sisi could be convinced to do it, probably even support them with certain force for a limited time until they train their own people, probably from Gaza. Many in the joint government that will be established will be Gazans, of course, and probably even some of them, no one who has a background in participating in terror should be accepted. But of course, in Gaza, there are many people who are Islamist. In Egypt, there are many people who are Islamist, and in Jordan, not to mention Turkey, where the ruling party is Islamist. We do not pretend to kill the idea of Islamism, but we are determined to make sure that Hamas as an organization will not rule and will not threaten Israel from Gaza. And this could be accomplished. I'm confident, part of the situation has to do with their weaknesses, and most of the responsibility are on the Palestinians themselves. But the strategy that worked in the mind of Netanyahu for more than 5 years and collapsed in 7 October morning was the idea that Hamas is an asset and the Palestinian Authority is a liability, rather than the other way around. And he kept this policy for 5 years, and he bribed them with the protection money signed by the Qataris with probably $1.5 billion. Half of it was used in order to build this infrastructure that we are facing now. So we cannot tell ourselves that there was really a consistent fighting against Hamas. There was a kind of attempt to live with them and even strengthen them, which is quite distorted idea. You have to ask yourself, why the hell the government of Israel and its head, and Netanyahu is not a lightweight, he's a thoughtful person, he understands history, a son of historian, and very experienced. So what could drive him to think that he has to strengthen Hamas and destroy the Palestinian Authority? The idea was explicitly told by him. He said, whoever wants to block the emergence of a Palestinian state side by side with Israel should make the Hamas stronger and the Palestinian Authority weaker. Some of the listeners might not understand what's the logic in this. It's simple. once Hamas is strong and active in terror and in Gaza, and the PA, the Palestinian Authority, is weakened, no one can seriously ask Israel to start a political process with the Palestinian people, because we can easily argue, okay, how can we negotiate with Abu Mazen in Ramallah if it doesn't control half of its own people?
Right.
And with the Hamas, no one really argues that with such murderers we have to negotiate. So it's kind of a way to avoid the real discussion about the big elephant in the room, which had been and remained and will be in the future, the Palestinian issue. In a way, this is another main thesis of Netanyahu, which collapsed. The idea that you can manage Israel, navigate Israel in this tough neighborhood, and it's tough neighborhood. The Middle East is still nothing like the Midwest. It's a place where there is no mercy for the weak. No one has a second opportunity if he cannot defend himself. I used to say you can enjoy it like a villa in the jungle. Inside your villa, you can enjoy the jacuzzi or listen to classical music. When you step out, you have to be ready to pull the trigger within a split second. So this is a complicated situation, but we have something to do about it. And you know, recently, just yesterday, I heard Bibi talking to Dana Besh, and start to raise, or some other anchor, and raising the question, how come that America did not demand the resignation of Bush Jr. Following 9/11? My answer is simple. If Bush Jr. would have been promoting the strategy to strengthen Al-Qaeda and weaken the moderates in the Arab world, if he would back Gaza, backed Al-Qaeda with billions of dollars along many years after 9/11, the American people would revolt against him. He would face a very strong demand to get to resign. Now to the other question about our side. I asked for a long time for a new election and early election, as early as possible. I'm confident that that's the only way. We are following a recommendation of Netanyahu, you know, 15 years ago, after following the 2006 war, the second Lebanese war. Another prime minister, Olmert, was leading the war. Netanyahu was the head of opposition. So he used to usually ask the public. Cynical people tell us that the guy who destroyed the whole situation is the one to repair. It's like thinking of the captain of the Titanic, if he would have survived, demanding to take control of the new ship. He even said, you know, it's a life of a nation is not a personal march for survival of a prime minister. It's exactly what happened now with him. He is responsible for this collapse of all these strategies, and he cannot lead. You know, a person where 4 out of 5 adult Israeli see him as the main responsible for this blunder of October 7th, and 3 out of 4 demand that he will resign. Some of them say immediately, some of them say after the war. But in Israel, wars are supposed to take 6 days, 3 weeks, 2 months, not years. So people do not trust him. So the only way is to go to the public. In Israel, it's possible. We have different systems than yours. It's possible, and we have to do it. And the answer is early election. Politically speaking, it's not easy to arrange it, but it will happen, I believe.
Right. The entire structure, though, of what and it seems rational and well thought out, but the entire structure hinges on Gaza first, not being Gaza only. And I come back to the basic proposition: you will not get Arab state buy-in while you have an active kinetic campaign in Gaza. Number one, you're not going to have any chance of getting Israeli buy-in unless the hostages are freed. And finally, there'll be no chance of buying off on a regional approach unless there is an acceptance on the part of the government of Israel of a political horizon. So what you're suggesting is you will definitely need new leadership on the Israeli side to have any of this happen.
Yeah, that's
No,
true.
I want to ask
New
you
leadership,
about,
not just because of the failures that led to the present situation, but because of the absence of horizon with this government. This government, Netanyahu, seems to fight for his personal survival. So he basically relies on this unholy alliance. He has 64 members of the Knesset now because he's backed by those two racist Messianic guys and by the ultra-Orthodox,
yes,
who do not even participate in the fighting. So it's an unholy alliance that by bribing them with irresponsible national budget for more than 1 year, he holds them somehow together. Of course, I hope that the critic and the resistance from the rest of the public will do the job and topple down. Unfortunately, he was clever enough, Netanyahu is a savvy politician, to join into the war cabinet to leading members of the opposition. Gantz and Eisenkot, both of them were generals commanding our armed forces, and they are there because of personal and national responsibility. They are worried that if they will not be present at the war of cabinet, some much worse decision might be taken, either about the fighting or about the hostages. But at the same time, their very presence there signals somehow to Israel that the time had not yet come to do something more aggressively, to turn the table off and to basically to coerce the government to resign. I talk to influential Israelis, but when it comes to politics and war, everyone takes the coat of ordinary citizen. So when I ask people, how come that you see you are experienced person, a lot of influence in your arena, be it in the academy or in business, in high tech or in former politician? Why don't you raise the voice to put an end to this bizarre gliding toward the abyss? So people tell me, Barak, I got convinced that you are convinced, but you are not the only person around. What do I, the ordinary citizen, know that Gantz doesn't know? Eisenkot doesn't know? President Herzog doesn't know? Head of opposition Lapid doesn't know? Lieberman doesn't know? As long as all of them are quiet, me, the ordinary citizen, thinks that probably time had not yet come.
Right.
And that's tragedy because there is urgent need to stop this drift toward the abyss. And the public doesn't see a personal example, energy, focus, determination. Even in political wars, you have, first of all, to clarify to yourself what you want to achieve. So it's not easy. I think that it will happen this way or another, but under the heavy pressure from the families of the hostages and those who, the equivalent of probably 5 million Americans are refugees within their own country. I want to warn. I warn Israel, so I want to share it with you. I warn Israel, if we fail to topple down this government because of its twisted way of decision making or absence of decision making, we might find ourselves 9 months from now still without election, but still deep in Gaza without being able to fully solve it because there is no one to hand it over to, with a third intifada in the West Bank, with attrition war or probably full-scale war in the north with Hezbollah, still with Houthis from Yemen and other, the militias that probably as important, and losing American support on the grassroots and also on the government level, and risking the Abraham Accords, because there is limit to what extent the Arab moderates can go with that, and even risking the peace agreement we already have. So it's a major coup, and not to mention Israel isolated from the world. So it's a tragic trajectory start to develop, and we have something very concrete to do about it, just to convince either the Michiganders or the ultra-Orthodox to leave this government, or 10 members of Likud or so. That's not impossible. I even recommended to the public, make a huge demonstration. Go to the Knesset, sit around the Knesset. If 30,000 Israel will sit around the Knesset 24/7 for 2 or 3 weeks, and opposition leaders will leave the discussions in the Knesset. It's empty, it's hollow parliament, because the juristic, there is no separation of power. The executive fully control the legislative power, and even the juristic power under heavy pressure for a long time by this coalition. So basically, there is a way to do it. It's up to us. I don't expect Biden or Schumer. I highly appreciate their position, and I highly appreciate the calling of Schumer. We can talk about it, but I expect the job to be done by Israel. It's our immediate fate, not something that happens on the other side of the Atlantic.
All of that is wise and true. Today, the Prime Minister is going to be addressing a Republican Senate lunch. We have an election coming up in November. It's among the most consequential, I would think, in modern American history. The myth that we don't intervene in your politics and you don't intervene in ours is a myth. And I agree with you. As important as the U.S. role is, these are decisions that will have to be made by Israel under extremely difficult circumstances. I'd only wish that someone with your wisdom and your foresight would, in fact, be able to have a greater influence on the political class. Reality is going to intervene, I suspect, and have a pretty profound impact on Israel for all of the reasons that you, Mr. Prime Minister, have identified. We've reached the end of our session. I just wonder if you had any concluding thought on a more hopeful note that you could share with us?
First of all, I'm optimistic. It will be probably worse along the way, but at the end, we will overcome this crisis, as we overcame others. So I am optimistic, but I want to make one short remark about crisis. Netanyahu is the last person on earth who can complain about intervening in someone else's politics behind his back. He did it in the Congress, the case of Obama, in a very ugly manner. But having said that, we, prime ministers of Israel, perceive ourselves as the leaders of the Jewish people. If you are the leader of the Jewish people, you have to listen to your audiences. Schumer is the head of not just ardent and great friend of Israel, he is the head of the biggest and most important community, Jewish community outside of Israel. American Jewry have a huge stake in the project named Israel. They are stakeholders. They deserve to be listened to very seriously when they talk to us. And not to mention Biden. Biden showed himself a more Zionist than a Zionist. In the first 3 days, where Bibi was totally out of balance, paralyzed by the event, Biden didn't hesitate for a moment. Airlift started immediately, order to the aircraft carrier to go to the area, to the neighbors, deterring Iran, deterring the Hezbollah, came to Israel, showed much more compassion than any member of our government to the victims of all this, and to criticize him, to make him the subject of that, a kind of distortion of not just of good manners, but of the strategic interest of Israel. Israel needs America for munitions for the fighting, for financial support, for deterrence of Iran, for protecting our safety net in the UN Security Council, even to protect Bibi or other leaders when they are called to The Hague, not to the political, to the criminal. So we cannot, Ben-Gurion said, we should never go to war without a superpower on our side. Bibi decided even this idea had to be broken, and he will fail the same way that, he promised the whole world to destroy Hamas. It ended up in October 7th. He promised to block Iran from turning nuclear. He made this effort with Trump to get America out of the JCPOA. Iran is now threshold nuclear power. He promised to avoid Palestinian state. He might end up Balfour as the Palestinian state if Cameron and the European Union will propose next month or the months after recognition of Palestinian state without any agreement with Israel. So somehow the cunning of history and the irony of history makes him the great visionary, 10 in talks and 0 in action. There is a joke in Israel, and with this I will end, that Bibi leadership size is medium M, and the size of the challenge is XXL. And it's 2 or 3 degrees beyond this capability.
Mr. Prime Minister, I want to thank you for coming back to Carnegie Connects. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your passion. And I hope you join us in another several months. Maybe the situation will hopefully be better than one we're watching right now.
It will.
Thank you so much for joining. Take care. Safe travels.
For having me.